The views and comments expressed on the following radio program by its hosts and their guests do not necessarily reflect the views of rmconair.com or its affiliates. Listener discretion is advised.
Unfortunately, no one can be told what the Matrix is. You have to see it for yourself. This is your last chance. After this, there is no turning back. You take the blue pill, the story ends. You wake up in your bed and believe whatever you want to believe. You take the red pill, you stay in Wonderland, and I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes. Remember, all I'm offering is the truth, nothing more. Knowledge of self.
Radio.
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 Peace. Welcome to the Knowledge of Self radio show. My name is Teray Allah. I have my supreme mind host to my left.
Peace, Jarul Allah.
Peace, Jakil Naj Allah.
And welcome. We're happy to be here today. Today commemorates El Hajj Malik El-Shabaz's birthday, and many of you know him as Malcolm X. And we would like to say peace in memory to Malcolm X's grandson, of all people, who returned to the essence not too long ago. And actually, our guest, which you'll meet later on in the hour, actually had a little bit of dialogue about that. But from what he said, Malcolm X's grandson was recently murdered in Tijuana. So it's going to be really interesting to see how stories such as that unfold. And again, peace to the family.
Yeah, actually, God, it was Saturday the 18th.
Saturday the 18th.
I just pulled it up on this article. It looks like they have two people who were suspects. They were waiters at a Palace nightclub in New Mexico. Yeah, which doesn't seem very common.
In New Mexico? Or
Pardon self, near Mexico City.
Oh, okay,
yeah,
okay.
Pardon self, didn't mean New Mexico. In Mexico City.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, and they're going to be facing charges of murder and robbery.
Wow.
A dispute, I guess, over a $1,200 bill.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
So more on that, huh?
Yes. So we encourage everyone to just continue to look into any type of information or events that's tied to what we could say the relatives of some of our freedom fighters. And it's very important that you keep abreast on these things. As we move on, let me begin by giving you the number 323-965-1600. Again, that's 323-965-1600. And this show is brought to you today by Global Position Solutions. Why don't we go ahead and begin with a couple of our current events? And why don't we go ahead and begin with Jakil?
Yeah, indeed.
Jakil.
Peace. So I got a current event today. It's about a man who was arrested in Philadelphia. His name is Adam Kokesh. And basically he has a internet radio show, and apparently the only thing that people can relate him being picked out of this crowd and being arrested for is that prior to attending this Philadelphia pot rally, he had announced to people that maybe they should do armed march on Washington D.C. And other than that, I mean, the guy has, no felonies. He's not a criminal. Just a normal person like the three of us. And he was at a pop rally and they picked him out of a crowd full of people who were smoking and all that. Yeah, pushed them all aside and grabbed him and pulled him out of the way. When you watch the video, it's kind of funny because they tried to throw him on the floor, and when that didn't work, the cops kind of programming, they didn't know what to do, so they're just kind of like, and they drag him off to the side. But you could tell they tried to throw the dude to the floor, and it didn't work. Yeah, he was actually real calm. He wasn't fighting back. He still held his microphone, and he was like, "Hey, I'm not resisting." Yeah, so we'll see what happens tonight. He's going to go to court. He's actually put in federal prison for this, so that's interesting too.
Where can they see the video?
I actually posted online, but there's a link if you follow at infowars.com/DC armed march on organizer Adam Kokesh arrested at Philadelphia pot rally.
Wow.
And for those who don't know, that's legal. You can just get arrested like that and thrown into federal prison based on the passing of that National Defense Authorization Act. I think it was like, a year ago or so?
Right.
Yeah, so they can just arrest you, throw you in a slammer, and boom, just be like that. So,
Yeah, so it's deep right now. People need to be aware of things like that.
Well, moving along, let's go into the questions of the day.
Indeed.
We're going to be talking a little bit about why knowledge of self, or actually social status versus knowledge of self. So what that means is, what's the difference between having knowledge of self and also what is our understanding of social status? So when we mean knowledge of self, it is aside from the fact that you may have a nice house, a nice car, make a significant amount of money, but at the same time you have a loss of identity. So what we're emphasizing on today's show is the importance of knowledge of self. And also having knowledge of self does improve your status in terms of life in general, right? So let's begin with the questions. What is social status? What is the difference between prescribed status and prescribed status? What is knowledge of self? What are some of the sacrifices? So keep that in mind. Sacrifices. What are you willing to sacrifice in order to accomplish something where you live? Specifically where we live in America, people sacrifice in different ways. How does the government and other organizations utilize the people's lack of self-knowledge to get rich off them? I love that question. And later on in the segment, this comes into play about Black Greek fraternities. Why were Black fraternities started? What role have they played in Black self-improvement and progress? How are Black fraternities used to divide our people? Why do Black fraternities call themselves Greek? So these questions and more will be answered on today's show. Why don't we go into the first discussion, which is about social status. So I wanted to go around the round table. Of course, I like to go last. But I wanted to hand it over to Jerul and Jakil and see how they define social status.
Well, a couple shows back, I built on social, coming from Rome, a Latin word that basically means allies. So I think when you look at social status, I think it pertains more to how people see you versus what is actually internally inside of you and how you see yourself. So the way I look at social status, it's kind of like more based on material things and things that you attain that make you feel like you've reached a level of achievement, which is more of kind of like a fallacy. You know what I mean?
Right. Kind of that shield you can put up to hide behind.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah. I think it's interesting, and I guess we'll go into this deeper into the show, but, when you meet certain people who don't have knowledge of themselves, but maybe are a doctor or a lawyer, that's kind of how they preference the conversation. Is, hello, I'm so-and-so, I'm a doctor. Or hello, I'm so-and-so, and I'm,
PhD, I'm this.
Right. Instead of really giving me something about yourself.
Right.
You know what I mean? Who are you really?
So how do you see social status?
I would say social status is just things that society has deemed important, useful. You know, even something as simple as being at Starbucks. You know what I mean? It's kind of a social thing. Like, okay, you got your Starbucks coffee. You know, that means you're cool. Or, you know, you got the newest pair of Jordans, right? That's socially acceptable amongst the ballers, right? If you know what I'm saying, if you don't have the newest Jordans on, you're not really cool like that.
Right.
You can't do that 360 spin move on me, homie, and some
Right.
and some Reeboks, what?
Right.
So you know what I mean? Yeah, so I'd say social status is just something that you put up as a front that society has deemed important for whatever reason. And those things kind of change.
Right.
Well put. Well said. I think that social status is basically the measure of how successful you are in a society. And everyone's concept of what success is, it varies. Maybe if you speak with someone who's affluent or really wealthy, they'll tell you that, well, last year I made, $2 million a month.
You've got to get the rich chuckle in.
Right? So that would be their idea of success, quite possibly. Whereas someone else who works 2 jobs and, they're struggling every day to make ends meet, success for them is completing a full day of work, which may have been something that was different last year. So I think social status and the whole idea of it really depends on your experience. However, the fact that we live in America and some of you live in some countries where, there is a really visible division between people who have more and those who have less, I think what it is something that society creates. That we're all different based on how much we have or how little we have.
Yeah, I think that's the biggest thing with social status is that it's not you who determines what's important. It's more about what society determines what's important.
No doubt.
And that generally comes from, a governmental foundation as opposed to, yourself.
I was going to say we did a show about that. What was your man's name?
Bernays?
Yeah,
Edward
Bernays.
Bernays, yeah.
And what I was really thinking about was how he did the whole thing in the fashion district, as far as having these people say, hey, it's so-called your choice to express yourself, but here are the tools. Here are the means to express yourself freely, but yeah, you should express yourself freely based on wearing these things. And I remember going to school, like junior high school, and randomly some kid would be like, oh, gear check. And people start looking at your labels like, oh, okay, y'all never did that at school?
Gear check?
Yeah, gear check, man. Or maybe it was a thing in the valley, I don't know. In any event, and so that was kind of a social status, because then people would start to clown on you based on what kind of gear and labels you were rocking.
Right, and we all know if you went to school in Los Angeles, especially what's considered South Los Angeles,
people had jokes.
If you went to school with anything other than Nike Cortez, that's when I went to school. Nike Cortez, Fila, all of the name brand tennis shoes, then you were laughed at.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And that was before people were wearing Vans and stuff like that. And I wonder if you had worn Vans during my high school days, if you had been laughed at. All right, so whatever was expensive.
If you were original.
Right, exactly.
Things change.
Yeah, the dudes would have laughed at you for real. You had to be in a certain social environment for that to be acceptable.
Right.
Which I think is interesting, because this kind of seems to be a big overall social concept of what things should be, and then within that overall social construct, there are sub-social constructs set up.
And I think above all of that, when you really look at the discussion that we're having, all the things that were mentioned, people are making millions and millions of dollars off. You know what I mean? Like the Nikes, the Filas, all these different name brands, they're making millions of dollars off of us based on us feeling like this is making us more, I guess, acceptable or a better individual. You know what I mean?
Right.
So
I'm definitely better than you because I have a BMW, which allows me to cut you off on the freeway. To all you BMW drivers out there, you're not allowed to cut people off because you have a BMW. Please stop.
Well, I'm glad that you mentioned that, because that would be a really good thing to address after the break. We're going to talk about some of the symbols that are used to determine status, such as the BMW. So please come back. We'll be back with you shortly on the Knowledge of Self radio show. Peace.
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 Peace and welcome back to the Knowledge of Self radio show. I'm one of your hosts, Teray Allah, to my left.
Peace, Jarul Allah.
Peace, Jakil Allah.
And before we went out on break, we started talking about social status, and we defined what social status is. And now we would like to go into a discussion about the symbols of social status. So what that means is, what are some of the things that people own, or at least they associate with in everyday life, that gives them this, gives people the impression that they are successful and that they have more than others, or even less than others. One of the symbols that we thought was really prevalent, especially among original people in America, actually all around the world now I think about it, is the fact that when it comes to men and women, body type would be considered a symbol of social status. So for example, those of you who are sitting next to your companion, whether you are male or female, you should take a look at your companion, and I think you should ask yourself, is your companion considered the ideal symbol of beauty?
Now, if you're a man, keep that to yourself.
Don't start no trouble, God.
Yeah. Keep that to
There's
yourself.
happy relationships out there.
So we wanted to begin with body type. And just think about, first of all, your companion, and now think about you. In the society we live in, a lot is placed on what our body type is, especially as it pertains to men. So I wanted Jarul to add on to that, because I know you're a personal fitness instructor. And what do you generally hear in terms of conversation with some of your clients, women and men?
Most of my clients are women, and the first thing they generally ask if they can accomplish is to first and foremost get a six-pack and get their butt bigger and their breasts bigger. Basically that's what it consists of. Right. Nothing having to do with their health. They don't really care about their health.
Not important.
That doesn't really matter. It's really just about how they look physically. And when you look at television, you look at media, music, you hear all these different things, you could see why people do think that way. One thing that I found interesting, and I've always thought about, is like, for example, if you look at, say, Caucasian women versus black women, it seemed like black women would like to lean, well, some black women would like to lean more into what I guess Caucasian society would deem beautiful. But when you look at Caucasian women, they want to lean more to what we would consider, beautiful. So bigger, bigger lips,
Right.
they tan the skin,
Right.
get butt injection, breast,
in the
you know what I mean?
trunk,
Like, yeah, so it's just.
breast lifts and
And I mean,
suntans.
Yeah, the tanning booths and all of that,
and since you brought up Caucasian women, I think this is something that has always been the case in society, is that in some circles, when, let's just say you happen to be a man of color, I'm going to use that word loosely, okay? You're a man of color, and you happen to marry a Caucasian woman. She's always been associated with the symbol of success. Like, I've made it to the highest part of my game, and she is the trophy. Okay, and of course, people can argue that, but there are a lot of original women out there, whether you be black, brown, or yellow, who can in some way understand that. Another thing in terms of body type, because we are talking about, what defines us as men and women. We've talked about that before. But generally, I think if you look at some of the things coming out of entertainment, Hollywood and media, it always dictates what is in style in terms of men and women.
Yes.
All right. So,
yes.
for example, let's just say when Tupac Shakur was among us, okay, bless you, and all of a sudden it seemed like many black males and some of our so-called Latino brothers, all of a sudden everybody had to have a shaved head. Okay? Whereas we know the older men, they started doing that when Michael Jordan started doing it.
Right.
You know what I mean? But it's always been done, but all of a sudden you had this
It's cool
sort of
to do it
shift.
now.
Yeah, like now it's in style and you have to have your hair like that. Honey, get your hair cut like that. It
Right.
just seemed maybe that was something that was going on. What else did we want to add on to as far as body type?
I think one thing, when you look at it, anytime somebody, for example, a woman gets in shape or a male gets in shape, they want to expose their body part that they feel confident in now to get some sense of status. Oh, look at my arms, look at my chest, look at my abs. So it's like none of this is dealing with you. It's more about how people perceive you as it relates to status, having some sense of status about yourself. So I think that's crazy. So
Wow. What about money? Now, money is a big discussion. You have a lot of it some days you don't have as much. However, in the society we live in, money plays a big part in how people perceive us in terms of success. So, in terms of money, I want you all to think about this. If you have ever been short of money, or if you are having a hard time making money, do you still consider yourself a valuable person? Because that's what we teach, that as soon as you come into the knowledge of yourself, you will always be wealthy. Okay, and that's the one thing that people can't take away from you. And the fact that you have knowledge of self, it trumps money and material items. Of course, we need those things, but not having some of those things shouldn't take away from your value as a human being.
Right.
So how did everyone see that in terms of money and social status?
Well, I'll add on. I think one thing to look at is that how you said knowledge of self versus having status. And I think a lot of that comes to just living within your means. And so you get a lot of people who, instead of having knowledge of themselves, meaning like, okay, I can't afford to do certain things, maybe still try and do those certain things because they're dealing with a social status. I mean, trying to party at the same clubs that everyone else parties at. I mean, trying to eat lunch every day, like everyone else eats lunch every day after work. And you know damn well that spending almost $10 a day at the end of the week, by the time you get your paycheck, you done spend up half of your paycheck on eating out at lunch, and you got food at home to eat, but you're still trying to have that social, equality with people and do that. So I think that's one thing to look at.
And not to mention, money is paper.
Right.
It's a piece of paper. It's, for example, what makes $100 bill is the same amount of paper that makes a dollar bill.
Just the picture.
You know what I mean? So, we're dealing with things that it's not really reality.
Right. And not only that, it says backed by legal tender. paper, which basically means
Right.
backed by nothing.
Right.
So let's think about that. That thing that you're chasing is backed by nothing.
Right.
It's the same as Monopoly paper. We all agree to use Monopoly money as regular currency. It'd be the same thing,
Man.
backed by nothing, and you just use it to exchange goods with each other.
That's crazy.
That's a thought for you.
Crazy.
So that's an interesting segue into our the next part of our discussion. How is skin color used to determine social status? Because I know that generally in our society, and let's all be honest, I mean, there are there's a growing population of Black multimillionaires, Latino multimillionaires. You can do your research on that. However, outside of the limelight, the people who are in the limelight of being wealthy and affluent in society, at least in American society, we have to look at the rest of our people in the United States. So, do we generally associate wealth with Black people or brown people? Do we generally do that? Or who do we generally associate wealth to in terms of skin color?
Wow.
Generally.
Yeah, I got to be honest, God. I would say, I personally associate wealth, you know what I'm saying, with a colored man, with a white dude.
Okay.
Although I know there's a lot of, and I know some wealthy yellow seeds, black seeds. But I would say as a whole, I think I would definitely look at the colored man as having more wealth, at least in America.
Okay.
Yeah, I think when you really look at it, though, I think the structure that we live in was created because of, like, for example, like if you look at the origin of the Caucasian man when he came down from the mountains, he came from an area where there wasn't a whole lot of resources. So when you look at the structure of money, it seems as if it was created in a means to give him some sense of power over others, because the areas we lived in, we had resources, we had food, we had all the things that we needed to survive. But if you look at that Caucasus Mountain area, it's a tough region. You know what I mean? So
Definitely not the best part on the planet.
right. So I think that the system that we live in was created for that specifically, because he realized that he wasn't going to be able to really gain any sense of power unless he created a system that would, I guess,
enable him to
give
be
him
powerful,
create a facade of giving him some sense of power about himself, because it is, like I said, money is a facade. Like, it's not real.
Right. And I mean, that's another thing that you'll hear people saying, that money is power. Okay. Then we go back to, what would people sacrifice for sake of social status? So you have to ask yourself, and also ask people around you, what would you be willing to sacrifice in order to get ahead? And now we can talk about some scandals. I mean, you could just look up any type of scandals, whether it be in politics or entertainment or, anywhere else, maybe in your own workplace, where people make certain sacrifices. Some of them may be unethical or immoral, in order to get ahead, because they come to, or at least they have come to believe, that money is power. Okay, and more money equals a certain set of material things that you're able to, I guess, get in life, to make it real simple. So why is this status important in white society? I mean, what difference does it make whether or not you have a little bit more or you have a little bit less? Like, how is this treated in our everyday life?
Well, like I said before, I mean, I feel like, it has a lot to do with giving them a sense of status about themselves. Because, like I said, originally, they didn't have anything. So they looked at us, and we were in regions where there was gold everywhere, fruits, vegetables, all types of different things. We had these huge structures that we built. We had the science, the mathematics, all these different things. When he barely had anything,
We were in the Garden of Eden.
Right. So it's like, okay, well, I like all the things that they have, so what can I do to give myself that same feeling or that same sense of status? So,
well said.
And not only you said, that same sense of status, but also in many cases to take those things.
Right.
A lot of those things that we had, then we don't have.
Right.
And that we're chasing this fake sense of status. Y'all seen that new commercial with Beyonce? How light she looks?
Yeah, I saw her on a billboard.
The Pepsi commercial or something. She's dancing in the mirrors or something. I mean, she still look hot. That's just Beyonce. She's gonna look hot no matter what color she is. But yeah, she's definitely a lot lighter now than she was Destiny Child Beyonce.
I mean, I've heard some of the media lately over the last year or so about the concern that cosmetically she's changed dramatically since the beginning. Of course, I would say to each his own. However, at the same time, it goes back to what we said. How much are you willing to sacrifice to maintain social status? So once you have it, are you going to change your looks cosmetically to the degree to where maybe by the time you're 40 or 50 years old, people say, wow, you look completely different than when you first came out. What happened to your natural appeal, which is what people first loved about you.
Right.
So sacrificing your body would be a really good example of sacrificing for sake of social status.
Right.
So why don't we go ahead and want to move into another topic after break. After our break, we're going to talk about what is knowledge of self, and we'll go into a discussion about the Black Greek Fraternities. Peace. Come back with us.
Peace.
Peace. Welcome back to the Knowledge of Self radio show. My name is Teray Allah. To my left.
Peace to rule Allah.
Peace. Jakil Knowledge Allah.
And before we went out on break, we were talking a little bit about social status. And now I think it's important for us to go into a deeper discussion about knowledge of self and what knowledge of self is. So why don't we go ahead and begin with defining what knowledge of self is, because of course this is the Knowledge of Self radio show. Now remember before we did the first show, we did have this long discussion about whether or not the first show was a really good time to go into that discussion, and we opted out of it for several reasons. But today I think we want to go a little bit deeper into what knowledge of self is. So of course I like to go last. And send it to my left. What is knowledge of self?
Yeah, well, the way I see knowledge of self, and I'll just speak from me specifically, it just gives you a foundation that, gives you like a structure or a basis to build on. So, what does that really mean? So, based in the world that we live in now, outside sources dictate who we are and tell us, okay, well, this is what you are, this is where your people came from, this, right? So knowledge of self is knowing who you are and where you fit in, not only in your life, but how you fit in the universe.
Right, know your origin.
Right, knowing that you're of value and knowing that no one can tell you or dictate who you are. So that being said, once you get to a place of really knowing yourself, taking the time to research, study, and come to a place, like I said, of knowledge, then you're firmly rooted. and then status and those types of things aren't a concern of yours because you naturally have a status about yourself because you have dignity, you know. So
Right.
that's a real basic how I see it, you know what I mean?
I'll add on to that.
That's it.
Yeah, that is well said. I don't even want to necessarily say too much more and mess that up. I'll say, really made me nod to self. Is a civilized person. You know what I mean? It's someone who really understands who they are and how they relate to other people and their interactions with other people, and you know what I'm saying, basically like cause and effect, and kind of how what they do also has an effect on other people, and will strive to do greater things to affect people in positive ways.
Yeah, that's important.
Wow. So I think just to add on, one of the things that I generally ask people is I ask them, "Who are you?" And the reason
Alice
why
in
I ask
Wonderland.
people that is because
Who
people
are you?
have asked me that. And the first answer that most people will give you is they'll say their name. And then that's when the discussion about knowledge of self really is. So my response to that question, if you tell me your name, I'll say, well, actually, that's not your name. That's the name that someone gave you. So now what is your name? The names that we reveal on this show are names that we added up and we wrote for ourselves. Okay, so we name ourselves. Now, in saying that, when you say that you are this person's name, whether it's your mother or father who gave it to you, technically speaking, that's a name someone else gave you. So now you're still, in sense, you have a loss of identity. So that means you have to find yourself, which means that you have to go out into life and educate yourself to where you can find out who you truly are. I know most of us who are of African descent in America, many of us can't trace our family tree where we can physically take it out and show you beyond like the 1800s, okay? Because, Caucasian slave masters and traffickers did a really good job of destroying records from, as far as where we were. Now there's DNA, which is great. But again, that still means that we're dealing with a loss of identity, something that's really, actually, it's one of the biggest problems, I think, for young people. They really don't know who they are.
Right. And
so, go ahead.
No, I would just say, and they've done studies on this. People who, for instance, and I can't remember the name of the study, but they did it with Chicanos because they were arguing about keeping that in the school systems. And they were saying that not only did it benefit so-called Chicanos, right, to have a knowledge of themselves and who they were and who they came from and their ancestry, but it also helped Caucasian people who were in the class who now have a knowledge, understanding of who those people were and could appreciate their culture. And so, it definitely, and it helped them. And those people were more prone to go to college and be successful in life versus people who didn't have knowledge of that history.
Yes, that's self-confidence. That self-confidence. Okay, I'm of value.
Right.
So, like when you look at the history that we're taught in school, it doesn't really teach us anything of prestige about ourselves. And also, other students in the class that might be, say, white, yellow, brown, whatever the case may be, it also teaches them that same thing about us. So they have a lack of respect for us, and
to add on to what you just said, that was a really great point, because not only do the history books, they teach us what has divided people on the planet, but it fails to tell us how we are all connected. And that's where knowledge of self comes in. We try to establish how we are all connected, because we're not anti-white. We like to show and prove who the original man and woman is. We can teach you what Caucasian's history is, because we have to be well versed in all of those things. But for the most part, we're trying to establish how we're all connected, and that's 1 degree in knowledge of self, no doubt about that.
And it goes further than that. How are we all connected to the universe? It doesn't stop. Like the universe itself is like we exist in the universe, so we are the universe. Like there's no separation. So
Indeed, yeah. I was I was rocking my shirt with the flag on it.
Mm-hmm.
It said, "In the name of Allah." This dude asked me, and he was from the Middle East. I'm sure he was probably Muslim or familiar with it. So he was like, "Yo, who's Allah?" I told him, "That's you. It's the people, and the people is everything." And then and he kind of looked at me like, wasn't ready for that answer. He's like, "That's deep." Yeah, I hit him with a heavy one.
Yeah.
But I think that's another thing of having knowledge yourself, and dealing with the whole connectedness. You were talking about how we're connected to people and different things, and how we're connected to the universe. And so once you really realize, which a great cartoon for a lot of people to watch that builds on that is Full Metal Alchemist.
Yeah.
And real quickly in that cartoon, they take the kids out to this island, and they have to figure out basically why is one, how's it go, one is all and all is one. And they basically figure out that everything is interconnected with everything else.
Right.
And you can't really separate one thing and have that by itself, isolated. It doesn't exist. Just like, what do you say? A man is not an island to himself. You know what I mean?
Right.
We're all connected.
Right.
Deep. Wow.
Yeah.
Well, I think I want to save this question for our next discussion, in terms of why some of us choose social status over knowledge of self. What we're going to get into shortly before this break, and then we'll continue the discussion after the break, is about Black Greek fraternities. Those of you who have attended universities, whether you pledge or not, you have been exposed to the Black fraternities, or let's just say fraternities in general, fraternities and sororities. In this case, when we...
Although all the black ones have the cool dances and stuff. That's probably really what attracted you. Yeah.
Right.
That's true.
So that's what we wanted to bring to light today. We want to focus a little bit about the Black Greek fraternities, a brief history about where those came from, but more importantly, do they still represent the principles that they were founded on? The brother that we have here today, his name is Sloan, and I would just like him to give us a little bit of background in terms of your role in Black Greek fraternities, and I would like to welcome you here to the Knowledge Self Radio Show.
Man, absolutely. It's an absolute pleasure to be here, Knowledge Self Radio. Again, my name is Sloan Toussaint Baptiste. I'm named after the first ever black general, Toussaint Louverture, the leader of the Haitian Revolution. And
that's Steve.
Yeah, it's one of those things, like when you guys are talking about knowledge of self and understanding the history, I feel fortunate that I had that lineage to go back to. That root was already planted for me. So, everything you guys have been talking about so far really it hits home for me, because I know how important it is to be able to trace back your direct lineage and your heritage and celebrate black culture to its fullest extent.
That's peace. Right on.
So you want to go into a little bit about the involvement you've had with black fraternities, and just tell the people, how you feel it's relevant, and what direction would you like to see the fraternities move in terms of what we're talking about as far as knowledge of self.
Yeah, well, I pledged at Rutgers University. I pledged entering my 4th year. I was there for 5.5 years, but entering my 4th year, I decided to pledge Omega Psi Phi fraternity. And really what drew me to them, aside from seeing them, being the wild people in the parties. And,
with the cool dances and
with
stuff,
the cool
right?
dances.
Yeah, I'm telling y'all.
Having the ladies flocking to them. But to see them the next morning in the front row of class on time really stood out to me. Like, man, they party hard, but they also getting their education on and they're in the books.
Hard, huh?
And that really drew me in, because for a long time, being a student athlete, I always had to dumb down that I was smart. I would be in class, but I would sit in the back. I didn't want anyone to know that I actually enjoy learning, so I would hide it. So when I seen a group of young men, brothers, that actually was unashamed of being intelligent black men, that immediately drew me to them.
That's powerful from the standpoint of status, because you could see how it works in the negative. You know what I mean? Like, some of our people in our community think that if you're intelligent,
Yeah.
is a negative status to that.
Exactly.
So to talk a certain way or act a certain way,
Dumb down your language.
Yeah, dumb down your language gives you status. So yeah,
Yeah.
that's crazy. That's crazy. Yeah.
Okay. So, can you give us some of the principles of Omega, and how are they applicable to Black progress and the betterment of the world we live in today?
Absolutely. Well, Omega Psi Phi fraternity was founded November 17th, 1911, and our 4 cardinal principles are manhood, scholarship, perseverance, and uplift. The way I related it in terms of the order and why they would even have those 4 principles, when you think back into the time when it was founded, 1911, you know, to be a black man, you weren't even considered that much. You were less than a dog for the most part. Right. So they wanted to make sure that they plantly affirm that you are a man, you know, and manhood is a principle which needs to be practiced. You know, it's something that you should be working on every day. So manhood is a principle, and so is scholarship. So when you take manhood and combine it with scholarship, now you have growth going on. And then through perseverance, being a black man, you're gonna go through your shares of trials and tribulations. But when you combine the first 2 cardinal principles of manhood and scholarship, you should find a way to get through whatever hardships you're dealing with. And then lastly, our last cardinal principle, uplift. Once you figured out how to get through those trials and tribulations or whatever it is it took for you to succeed, you should go on and help the next brother or whoever is in need of help. So that order makes sense to me. Manhood, scholarship, perseverance, and uplift.
It's almost like knowledge, wisdom, understanding, culture.
That's crazy. That's the same science.
All right, so I think that was well put. And one of the things that I think some of us who have never been involved in Black fraternities, the discussion has been that Black fraternities have been used to divide Black people. Because whereas some will pledge, some will be in one sorority or one fraternity, those of us who are not involved in that sorority or fraternity are not being embraced in terms of the larger network of scholars, as you mentioned. So how do you see the relationship between Black fraternities and, you know, members in Black fraternities and the people who aren't involved in them? I mean, why isn't there more of a togetherness and closeness in terms of building something?
Well, to touch on William Edward Bogart Du Bois's theories of the talented 10th, elitism, you know, that's probably one of the major problems within Black people in general. You know, once we hit a certain level of success, we forget about those who haven't reached that level. And a lot of times with Greeks, especially Black Greeks, we're exposed to different things that other people aren't exposed to. So that elitism mentality definitely starts to take form. But when these fraternities and sororities were founded, the premise was to actually promote Black scholars, you know, to really push young Black men and women to go to college, get through college, and then have a network to be able to become successful in whatever industry that you plan to take part of. But naturally, competition, you know, breeds a lot of jealousy, a lot of hatred, and a lot of the times, you know, it's friendly competition, but it can spoil over to, you know, who has the best, you know, fleet of women on them, or who has
status.
Yeah, status, like you guys are talking about. So, you know, a lot of the times we drift away from what our first, you know, purpose of the fraternities was, and that was to promote scholarly excellence within the Black community. And
now,
we're losing that.
For me, one of the things that was brought up early on and just trying to improve my mind, this was prior to me coming into the to knowledge of self, you know, the knowledge of myself, meaning, you know, I was exposed to quite a bit of information. And one of the things that many of us took issue with was the branding. Because many associated that, many of us associated that with some of the practices that took place on certain plantations.
Yes, sir.
So, I mean, we being black people, how are we able to justify the fact that we're branding one another,
Yes,
even
sir.
in the name of black fraternity? What would be how have you heard others address that?
Well, and not giving up too much information as far as to what we do in our fraternity. The branding for me symbolizes a reminder of my pledge.
Okay.
I wake up every morning reminding myself that I went through something and I have to keep in mind of what it means to uphold these traditions.
Okay.
So there's certain things that I hold myself accountable to, especially in public. And just waking up and seeing that mark on my arms and on my legs, you know, I know that I have to hold myself accountable for my actions. And a lot of the times the brand also represents a symbolism. You know, it's like it's like your mark of honor, so to speak. Some people take it as that, you know, but for me, I take it as it's a constant reminder of my pledge. I wake up every morning and through scarification, I'm reminded that I went through a process that should make me
A better person
in this
Right.
world.
I see that.
And I'm glad you broke that down, because it's similar to what's done among the Samoans,
Yeah,
the Tongans,
yeah, definitely.
and a host of original people around
So it has
the world.
origins in something other than
Definitely.
slavery.
Right, but
Definitely.
it's never been explained that way. It was just like, cause this is just, you know,
Yeah.
it's my pledge. You know what I mean? And it was just limited to that. It's like, what, you branding yourself?
Yeah.
Okay. So
Maybe they had just a certain kind of status too among that. Like you said, that is a certain kind of status.
Yeah.
And you know, there are people who go through, I'm sure, many rituals and rites, and who don't really have an understanding of what it is that they go through. You know what I mean? That's a 5, 10, and 85% in everything.
Definitely.
Yeah.
And some people get it, some don't.
Yeah, I wanted to know what is it that you think, and you can only speak for yourself and what you've observed. What is it that some of our people in fraternities are overlooking in terms of what they're supposed to be doing? Like, why is it that they don't understand that we're supposed to represent
Yes,
something
sir.
greater, not only just an organization, but we're supposed to,
Yes,
represent
sir.
something greater than that.
And then can you also touch on, because he asked that question too, as far as why is it only the elitism that separates the fraternity from helping the average man?
Well, to touch on both points, I'll start with the first point. You figure every one of these organizations are incorporated. So what happened was people got more into let's raise money, let's worry about the incorporation instead of let's worry about what the organization was founded upon, its principles. You know, let's really concentrate now on which organization can make the most money, who could throw the best party, and that's not what it was founded for. It was founded for, all right, this one says friendship is essential to the soul. Let's worry about the connection of friendliness amongst black men. This one says we shall transcend all and be servants of all. Then let's worry about being of service to our communities. Not let's throw the best party and who can raise this X amount of money in this night. So you see what happened was the incorporation of these organizations put people in a mindset as is a business, and it should be more than a business.
Right, and that's
business
a business
is good. Yeah,
you're naturally going to have competition
exactly
against one another.
Exactly. So they're worried about the business aspect and not really honing in on its
what
principles.
it's really about.
Exactly.
It seems like if they were to get past that, I mean, how you were naming off the different things that I'm sure different fraternities are part of,
Yes, sir.
they all kind of have a piece of the pie. And if they would kind of get rid of the BS and deal in equality with each other,
Yes, sir.
they can get a lot more done as far as the community and stuff like that.
Yes, sir. Now, don't get me wrong. I enjoy a good party myself.
Oh, no doubt.
Anyone who knows me will tell you, oh, that guy parties. But I'm equally as involved in
Doing the work.
doing the work and talking to the youth and promoting college and promoting, being a scholar. And to go off of what your question was, as far as the elitism, oftentimes what we see is when black people, particularly, when we go to college, you know, we start getting groomed to being more Europeanized. You know, where we're being groomed to get away from our Afrocentric side of us, and especially when we graduate these prestigious universities. You know, it's not a lot of us at these universities. So when we get out, you know, we kind of tend to forget. You know, man, I'm one of the chosen few who had an opportunity to even get through one of these universities. Not a lot of them make it. A lot of them go in. Well, we know the dropout rate happens. We know a lot of different circumstances happen, financial. They can't pay for it, whatever the case may be. But I think for me, one of the greatest gifts I learned in pledging Omega Psi Phi is never lose the common touch. You know, because you have a degree, or you get a title before your name or after your name, it's the core of your name that should matter to you and to your people. So the doctor is just something that you accomplish. The reverend is something you accomplish. The esquire is something you accomplish. But who are you?
You know, as an individual.
Yeah, the person in the middle, not the titles before or after your name, but who are you?
Yourself.
Yeah, and all those titles are for servitude too. You're supposed to be serving the people.
Service.
You know what I mean?
Be
So
of
that's what
service.
should be what matters.
Yeah, no doubt. You don't become a doctor to save lives and then not practice saving lives.
Exactly.
You're supposed to go out and serve then.
Exactly.
Well, I just want to know, did anyone want to add on?
I got a quick question. As far as the Greeks, how do you see, you know, black people calling themselves Greeks?
Yeah, well, for me, I consider myself Haitian American in the Black Greek Letter Society. But there were great Black Greeks once upon a time. But as Brother Ture said, you know, our history has been so efficiently cleaned out that we can't name these people. And for the most part, many black people, they begin their history with slavery. They haven't done the research to find out that you had kings and queens before you were slaves. They don't know the Mansa Musas of the world. They don't know the Hannibals of the world. You know, even the Toussaint Louvertures, or even the people in America, the Marcus Garveys of the world. They haven't really gotten into that because they've been so conditioned, as far as movies, music, and media, to only reference themselves with slavery.
Right.
And you figure the last year, we've been hit with Django. We've been hit with the Lincoln movie, and then in the recent movie with Jackie Robinson, 42. You know, you just seeing a man getting berated, and you know, and it's so well devised. You know, Hollywood is the master of imagery, so it's so well planned and orchestrated that all they want you to do is be conditioned to believe that the only thing that you ever were was a slave, and you started from that. But really, you have a great history that you have to uncover.
And we had talked prior to the show. How do the movies associated with fraternities? We gotta have a couple of minutes, but how did you feel that certain movies were harmful in terms of the image of black fraternities, or at least the purpose of them?
Man, that's an excellent question. When you look at movies, because I'm a movie buff myself. I love watching, you know, good films, quality films. But when you look at what the sensationalization and the commercialization of Black Greeks, it really changed why people wanted to pledge these so-called fraternities. You know, it's way more than stepping. It's way more than partying. It's way more than getting girls. It's way more than any of the social highlights that the fraternities were founded on. You know, it's a lot of sleepless nights where you're just doing research and trying to figure out what ways I can better serve my community. How can I help teach this young man that school is cool and swag is just something that they've conditioned you to believe is important. Really, you know, swag isn't gonna get you so far. You know, we forget that these movies are made to generate money. So they're only going to give you things that bring interest for you to come into those movie theaters and fill up those seats. They're not going to get into the real core of what these organizations stands for. So when they have 2 hours to film, they're only going to show you the party, the fun life, the highlight. They're not going to show you the blood, sweat, and tears and everything that goes into actually becoming
the social
productive.
status.
Yeah,
right. The
social status.
right.
And that's where being grounded and actually really researching the fraternities and the founders of your respective organization or whatever organization you're looking to get into, and really understanding them. What did they stand for? I don't think they were partying because they couldn't.
Right.
You know, they probably did get their party on, but they had way bigger issues to look after.
Right.
And they had a standard of excellence there
Right.
that was set for them. So.
Well, you know, we are out of time, but I would
Absolutely.
like to thank you, Brother Sloan, and of course my brothers.
Indeed. Peace.
And we look forward to seeing you all next weekend. Couple of things before we leave. What we would like you to do: fast from negative thoughts for a week and subscribe to our youtube.com KOS9 radio station. And check us out on facebook.com KOS Radio and twitter.com at KOS Radio 123. We'll see you soon.
Can I give one shout out?
Yes, sir.
I would like to give a shout out to my frat brother, Life. Allah Griffin, that's my brother. He's the one who told me, come check out the show, and I've been a big fan of you guys. Shout out to KOS Radio.
Peace.
Appreciate that.
Peace, everyone. See you next week.
Peace.
Peace.